Everyone remembers the furnace, but the real fire started when everyone knelt. King Nebuchadnezzar had built a giant golden statue on the plain of Babylon. It was enormous, shining, visible for miles, and about as subtle as shouting through a trumpet. This was not decoration. It was a public announcement made of gold. The king then summoned every official in the empire: governors, judges, treasurers, counselors, military officers, administrators, and several men whose main qualification was nodding at authority. They gathered before the image, while sunlight bounced off the statue like it personally wanted attention. Then a herald stepped forward and declared the royal order. When the music begins, everyone must bow. Every nation, every language, every rank, no exceptions. Anyone who refused would be thrown immediately into a blazing furnace. Simple system: obey the statue or meet the fire. Babylon appreciated efficiency. Then the music started. Horns blared, flutes cried, harps joined in, pipes made their best effort, and instantly the crowd dropped. Thousands fell to their knees, heads lowered, dust rose into the air. From far away, it looked like unity. Up close, it looked like fear with organization. Because crowds do not always move by conviction. Sometimes they move by panic. That was the real danger of the day. Not the flames burning nearby, not the smoke climbing into the sky, not the furnace. The fire started in the crowd. This was the kind of moment where pain was not the greatest threat. Being visible was. Because when everyone bows, standing up becomes an announcement. No one needed to love the statue. No one needed to believe in it. They only needed to notice everyone else kneeling. That is how pressure works. Knees mandatory, conviction optional. And in the middle of a field full of bent backs, 3 men remained standing: Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego. They did not shout. They did not protest. They did not start a speech. They simply refused to join in, which made them louder than everyone else. Nearby officials glanced sideways without moving their heads, a skill governments have always valued. Some people were shocked, some annoyed. Some were thinking, we are all trying to survive here. Please stop being principled in public. But the 3 men did not move. The music continued. The crowd stayed low. The statue gleamed proudly. And in the center of mass obedience stood 3 quiet problems, not violent, not dramatic, just upright. Power usually knows how to crush chaos. It gets uncomfortable around calm courage. Whispers spread through the kneeling crowd. 3 Jews, still standing, still refusing, still visible. Now the plane held 2 stories. One said everyone obeyed, the other said not everyone. That second story was dangerous, because empires can manage fear. What they cannot tolerate is courage people can see. Messengers rushed to the palace. There were thousands on their knees that day. But only 3 men had managed to stand out, and the king was about to notice them personally. They were not arrested for violence. They were not accused of sabotage. They had not insulted the king. Their crime was simpler than that. They did not go along with everyone else. Messengers rushed through the palace halls carrying the kind of news powerful people hate most: public disobedience, visible disobedience, calm disobedience. Nebuchadnezzar listened as the report was read. 3 Jewish officials, Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego. They had ignored the royal command. They had refused to bow. They had done it in front of everyone. Now, kings can forgive many things: failure, cowardice, corruption, even terrible music occasionally. But embarrassment in public? That usually gets immediate attention. Nebuchadnezzar was furious, not because 3 men were dangerous, because 3 men were noticeable. He ordered them brought in at once. The palace guards moved quickly. Governments become highly efficient the moment dignity feels threatened. Soon the 3 men stood before the throne. The king looked at them with the expression of a man deeply offended that other people had free will. "Is it true?" he demanded. He gave them one more chance. The music would play again. They would bow again. The problem would disappear. It was a generous offer, by dictatorship standards. Just kneel once. Pretend, blend in, make this easy for everyone. Because that is often how pressure speaks. It does not always demand belief. Sometimes it only demands performance. The king then added the threat. If they refused again, they would be thrown immediately into the furnace. And then came the question meant to end all questions. What God will be able to rescue you from my hands? Classic ruler mistake, confusing authority with infinity. The room went quiet. This was the moment where most people apologize quickly and begin inventing excuses. Misheard the music, knee injury, delayed reaction, temporary confusion. But the three men answered with the calm tone that usually terrifies angry people most. They said they did not need to defend themselves. Their God was able to deliver them from the furnace and from the king. But even if he did not, they still would not bow. That was the line that changed the room. Because now this was no longer negotiation, no longer fear management, no longer a second chance. It was settled refusal. Sometimes standing still costs more than running. This was one of those times. They were not trying to overthrow Babylon. They were not asking for a crowd. They were not making speeches in the streets. They were simply unwilling to fake agreement, and quiet conviction can be strangely expensive. The king's face changed immediately. The kind of expression that says reason has left the building. He ordered the furnace heated 7 times hotter, a dramatic number. Ancient rulers loved dramatic numbers. Servants ran to carry out the command. Guards prepared ropes. Officials watched carefully, relieved the problem was becoming physical. Institutions usually prefer punishment to introspection. The music had failed. The statue had failed. The warning had failed. So now only heat remained. Volume high, logic low. And while the furnace roared brighter in the distance, the three men stood exactly where they had been from the beginning. Still upright, still calm, still refusing to kneel. The king had demanded movement. Instead, he got stillness, and that made him even angrier. Soon the whole empire would watch what power does when it loses an argument. Nebuchadnezzar had offered music. He had offered a second chance. He had offered fear in polite packaging. None of it worked. So now he moved to the oldest method of all. If they could not be convinced, they would be burned. The king's face twisted with rage, not the controlled anger of leadership, the louder kind, the kind that usually appears when someone powerful realizes they are not powerful enough. He ordered the furnace heated 7 times hotter. Whether anyone measured that scientifically is doubtful. What mattered was the message. More heat, more spectacle, more consequences. Servants rushed to feed the flames. Bellows pumped. Wood crashed inward. Smoke rolled upward. The fire roared so violently it seemed determined to participate. Across the plain, people watched in silence. A crowd that had bowed easily now stood very still. Because fear is loud before punishment, then quiet during it. The 3 men were bound with ropes. Still no resistance. Still no panic. Still no bargaining. Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego. Calm men being tied up often create more tension than angry men shouting. The strongest soldiers in the king's guard were ordered to carry them. A dramatic choice. Kings love dramatic choices, almost as much as statues. The soldiers marched toward the furnace door through waves of brutal heat. The flames burst outward. The fire was so fierce that the men carrying them were struck down where they stood, which was an awkward start for the execution. The crowd recoiled. Even Babylon understood this was becoming excessive. Then the bound men were thrown into the furnace, and just like that, the empire had its answer. Or so it thought. Because this was never only about punishing 3 men, it was about warning everyone else. This is what happens if you stand out. This is what happens if you stay upright. This is what happens if you refuse the script. Power loves public examples, especially when reason has already failed. That was the real purpose of the flames. Not justice, not order. Intimidation with lighting effects. The king had lost the argument earlier. Now he wanted the fire to finish it. Volume high, logic low. And yet something strange was already happening. The furnace had taken the strongest soldiers first. The men outside were falling. The men inside had disappeared into the blaze. Smoke covered the opening. Heat bent the air. No one could see clearly. The crowd stared. Officials leaned forward. Servants froze. Nebuchadnezzar narrowed his eyes. Because power expects punishment to be simple. Input resistance, apply force, receive obedience. but real life often refuses clean calculations, especially when arrogance is doing the math. The king had ordered the hottest furnace Babylon could make. Maximum pressure, maximum fear, maximum certainty. And still, certainty was about to embarrass itself. The ropes had gone in with the men, the flames had gone in after them. But something inside that furnace was not following orders. Nebuchadnezzar stepped closer. The fire reflected in his eyes. He had wanted everyone to fear the flames. Instead, he was about to fear what the flames could not do. And suddenly, the numbers stopped making sense. Nebuchadnezzar moved closer to the furnace. The opening blazed white-hot. Smoke twisted upward. Heat rolled across the plain. And inside, something was wrong. He had ordered 3 men thrown in. 3. A simple number. Easy to count. Comforting even. Power likes numbers when numbers behave. But now the king stared into the flames and saw movement. Not collapsing. Not burning. Walking. He blinked. Looked again. Still there. He turned to his advisors. "Did we not throw 3 men into the fire?" They answered carefully, because this seemed like the kind of question with consequences. "Yes, Your Majesty. 3 went in." That part had been certain. The king pointed back toward the furnace. "Look, there were 4 men walking in the fire, unbound, unharmed, and the flames appeared to be accomplishing absolutely nothing. 3 entered. 4 were walking." That was the moment control began slipping in public, because rulers can survive many things: bad decisions, high taxes, gold statues with limited artistic merit, but visible failure is dangerous. The ropes were gone, burned away. The men were not. What should have held them had vanished. What should have destroyed them had not. The fire had changed targets. It burned their restraints, not their bodies. That was the true reversal. The furnace was built to consume. Instead, it released. Nebuchadnezzar kept staring. The same king who had ordered everyone down was now looking up in confusion. The crowd whispered. Officials exchanged the worried expressions of people realizing history was becoming inconvenient. Servants froze in place. No one had trained for this scenario. The king described the 4th figure as looking like a son of the gods. Ancient wording for a modern problem. Someone is in there who was not on the schedule. Inside the furnace, the men walked freely through the blaze. No panic, no smoke-covered desperation, no scrambling to escape. Just calm movement where destruction was supposed to happen. That may have been the most unsettling part of all. The fire still looked dangerous. It simply had no authority. Power hates when its best weapon stops cooperating. The furnace had been designed as a final answer. Now it was asking questions. How were they alive? Why were they free? Who was the 4th man? And why did certainty suddenly look so nervous? What should have ended them had exposed a limit instead. The empire had built a perfect crisis. Maximum heat, maximum witnesses, maximum intimidation. And now everyone was watching it fail live. Nebuchadnezzar stepped closer, then stopped at a safe distance. Pride has limits near open flames. He shouted into the furnace for Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego to come out. A dramatic change in tone. Moments earlier, he had commanded their execution. Now, he was requesting their return. That is how quickly power adjusts when reality refuses to cooperate. The 3 men walked out. No chains, no panic, no urgency. Just 3 men leaving the same fire that was supposed to erase them. Behind them, the flames continued burning as if nothing embarrassing had happened. But everyone knew. The furnace had failed. The ropes had not survived. The men had. And the king who ordered the fire now stood waiting for the men it could not keep. Because sometimes what is meant to destroy becomes the thing that proves it cannot. The crowd watched the 3 men step out of the furnace. Alive. Walking. Calm. Which was already more than anyone expected. Officials rushed forward to inspect them the way people do when reality has become suspicious. No burns, no injuries, no smell of smoke, not even singed hair. The furnace had delivered maximum heat and minimal results. Babylon was not used to that. The king stood silent for a moment, never a comfortable sign in a ruler. He had built the statue. He had issued the order. He had raised the temperature. He had arranged the spectacle. And somehow the only thing publicly damaged was certainty. The three men had not won because they avoided the fire. They won because they did not enter it alone. That was the part almost everyone missed. People often imagine victory as escape, no crisis, no pressure, no furnace at all. But sometimes the problem remains. It just loses power. That is what happened here. The flames still burned. The empire still existed. The king was still king. The furnace had not disappeared. Its authority had. That changes everything. Because fear depends on believable threats, and threats become weaker the moment people see limits. The crowd had bowed earlier because the fire looked final. Now they had watched it fail, publicly, in real time. That is difficult to unsee. Nebuchadnezzar finally spoke. He praised the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, a sharp turn from attempted execution. He declared that no one should speak against their God, also a sharp turn. Then he promoted the three men in the province of Babylon. An even sharper turn. This was not unusual. Power often changes language quickly after losing. Yesterday, punish them. Today, honor them. Tomorrow, officially deny ever being wrong. The empire moved on. Empires usually do. But the lesson remained. The greatest miracle was not that three men survived heat. It was that pressure failed to move them before the heat ever began. The furnace was dramatic. The crowd was decisive. That was where the first battle happened, when everyone knelt. When agreement looked automatic, when silence looked easier, when standing carried a price and they stood anyway. That is why the ending mattered, because the fire only revealed what had already been true. Their courage did not begin inside the furnace. It entered with them. And so did the presence beside them. Some victories look like escape. This one looked like company in the middle of danger. Some people wait for problems to vanish before they stand firm. That can be a long wait. Sometimes strength is discovered while the flames are still visible. Sometimes peace appears before circumstances improve. Sometimes the furnace stays hot and still loses. The king had tried to prove absolute power. Instead, he proved a boundary. He had threatened the body. He could not command conviction. He could order a furnace lit. He could not decide who stood inside it. And that was the final reversal. What looked like the end became the evidence. The fire seemed final until it revealed who was with them.